Hello, everyone. This is a new edition of the Multipolarity Talks, and I am very pleased today to be joined by Amine Tazi to discuss all things about the French public debt, French economy, and political outlook at this very critical time. So let me introduce my guest to you. Amine Tazi is an experienced economist and senior advisor in economics, finance, and public affairs. He worked for a long time in both the public and the private sector, holding senior position in different French ministries and agencies, including one that is very interesting for us for this podcast. He held the position of chief economist at the Debt Management Office within the French Treasury. So he's very knowledgeable about all the matters that relate to the management of public debt and to the relations with markets, with rating agencies, and all the participants in the market. So thank you for joining me, Amine. I'm very pleased.
Thank you, Alexandre, for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. And without more delay, I would like to ask you a few questions for our audience. First, perhaps if you can tell us a few words about the French public debt, how it is managed, who owns this debt, and overall, where do we stand on that?
Actually, I was chief economist of the Agence France Trésor, which is the agency that manages the French debt. And regarding the holding of French debt, actually, it's mainly owned by non-residents. Most of them are within the Eurozone, and the other ones, around 30%, are outside the Eurozone. Just a figure, the 40% of debt holding that are within the Eurozone, to me, it shows the special relation between France and the special position of France within the Eurozone. So that's it. And sectorally speaking, we'll have essentially insurance companies, will have mutual funds, but also banks and what we call primary dealers. So these are the main holders of the French debt, geographically and sectorally speaking. One of the important assets of the French debt is its liquidity. And it's something really important. I remember when I was working at the French DMO, one of the primary dealer, a bank that I will not mention, explained to me that to their clients, French debt liquidity is something that is well known to be for making it really attractive compared to other debts. Anyway, I think we said the essential of this matter, but that's the bulk of what we need to know.
Thanks. Great to hear that. So now let's tackle the more sensitive part of the debate. As we have seen over the last few years, especially after the COVID pandemic, the level of debt increased significantly, and the deficits that were incurred following the pandemic, which could be explained in some part to the measures that were taken by the French government as other governments to fight the effects of this pandemic. But there was kind of a slow reduction of these deficits. And if we come down the road to 2023, there was a debate, political debate in France about the true figure for the deficit, because, as you know, the true figure appears to be 5.5% of GDP. And the announcement back then that was into the budget bill for 2024 was around 4.9, so to say below 5%. So what does this tell us about the management of the public debt or expectations in connection with the political objectives and the political environment in France at that time and now?
I would just remind the public of the Greek situation in 2012 or 13, when the new government came and announced a public debt or deficit figure that was like tens of points of GDP higher than what was announced before by the National Institute of Statistics. So all this to say, there is in the French case, there is no comparison with incomparable. So yes, it's a deficit that's higher than expected, but we're far away from situations that are catastrophic. If we think to Greece 10 years ago, or even other countries,
when you look at the assumptions and the projections for the deficit over the next few years that were made by the French Treasury and the French government, and when you look on the other side at the comments that were made and analyses that were made by Standard & Poor's and other rating agencies that recently downgraded the French debt, so there seems to be a discrepancy. So how do you assess this discrepancy? Is the government too optimistic?
Is the government too optimistic? I would say yes, but it's all governments are optimistic. Like, it's something that is not so surprising. And in France, we have a lot of called garde-fous, like control authorities, and the one that is called HCFP, Au Conseil Finances Publiques. This one pointed months ago that the growth and even inflation figures and public finance figures and estimations in the last French budget law were too optimistic. So nothing new in the story. This gets us back to your first question about credibility and assumptions. Yes, of course. I mean, to make our forecasts credible, we have to make hypotheses. Basically speaking, and not going too much technical, if you want to have a decent debt over GDP projection, you can adjust your inflation forecast, you can adjust your growth forecast. These are the parameters that plays a role in your final forecast. But if we split the technical or economical financial side and the political one, of course, even yourself, Alexandre, if you were a minister of finance, yes, you will be, if you have to arbitrate in these parameters, you'll choose the ones that seems to you more arranging or more credible depending on the situation.
Okay, I see what you mean, but would you say that there is a lack of realism between what is needed to restore this sustainability and the actual measures that were presented by the government, the expenditure reductions that were announced, about 10 billion and another 10 billion that were supposed to be found before the summer? and the reality that it would take perhaps much more than that, maybe 60 or 80 billion euros of savings to get back to this 3% target by 2027. So in this regard, what can the government do if you put yourself this time in the position of the French Minister of Finance or the President?
Okay, let's say we're both are economists. And the notion of debt sustainability, to me, we'll talk about this later, but I mean, it depends theoretically on some economic concepts that are not observable, like the potential GDP. So what make a debt sustainable in terms of calculation depends on your what we call R G minus G, which is the growth, potential growth, inflation levels and estimates, etc. No, I don't know if there is public debt that is sustainable. If we put things this way, technically, maybe the German one, but anyway, we can talk about it later. About our government, the French government, naturally speaking, to be honest, they recognized they didn't have choice. The Minister of Finance, Bonema, recognized simply that yes, to be on track for the 3% deficit objective in 27, we were needing to around 20 billion economies from now on. To me, it seems honest, and if he wouldn't say that, I think he's aware of the risks he could take, both politically and in terms of communication, if he underestimated the risk and the economies that were needed. So I think the 25 billion that he estimated, or at least communicated about, to me, it's a fair figure, and it was a good decision from him.
So you think there should be more of that? There would be more of that coming? Whoever is in charge over the coming years in terms of deficit reduction effort?
Actually, you're taking me into an interesting point. If you think about the institutional, functional, and procedural budget finances decisions and budget laws implementation and votes, it's hard to answer. No one can answer your question actually, because I could say yes, but I have no assurance that there won't be a rectificative budget law, and that the new governments coming thereafter won't put in force other measures that are contradictory to what we're saying. So I would say, in terms of political engagement and seriousness and public finance seriousness, yeah, it's something to monitor day to day. Of course, you need to plan, and then you have to adjust if you have positive or negative economic and financial surprises. Financial surprises could be higher or lower rates, for example. Economic surprises could be higher or lower growth and inflation.
For the record, we are doing this podcast just 1 week before the parliamentary elections that were called by President Macron following the results of the European elections. We have two contenders for power, in addition to the central, incumbent centrist coalition. We have the left wing or leftist coalition called the Nouveau Populaire. And we have, last but not least, perhaps more importantly, the Rassemblement National, which is a populist or some would say far-right party, whatever the label. What do you think about these two parties, two very different, political organizations, views and program, and its consequence on the French debt and French deficit? Perhaps starting with the Nouveau Front Populaire, the left-wing coalition, and then we will move to the Rassemblement National.
Signed by NFP, Nouveau Front Populaire. Unfortunately, it's pulled on the radical left side by a party called France Insoumise, which is the equivalent of Podemos in Spain years ago. So it's the radical left, and the NFP economic program is unfortunately it's too much weight by this radical left, which make it in some ways over Keynesian. Like the first estimate we have of the cost of their program are becoming closer and closer to 100 billion, like 100 billion euros of expenses. It's unimaginable. If we turn to the national rally, I'm smiling because I really looked for the maximum information about their economic program. They don't have one. They are, when we look at polls at the European election, they came first. When you look at polls now for the parliamentary elections in France, they are still first. But economically speaking, except one measure in their program on which they put a figure, which is lower VAT on energy and fuel, etc., there is no figures in their program. We have to wait for the second round of the election, maybe, or this week, to know a bit more. But to me, it's worrying as much as the NFP. So the NFP, the left-wing worrying economic program, the national rallies one is also worrying, and we can, to be honest, we have nothing to say about it today. Not enough information to have a real opinion.
But some people would say that actually Rassemblement National, if we look at the recent statement by some of its leaders, it kind of embraced a more fiscally conservative position than the Nouveau Front Populaire. And there are now many articles or statements to the media, for example, from someone like Jean-François Tanguy, who is an MP from the Rassemblement National, and he looks like he could be the next Minister of Finance should the Rassemblement National come to power in a Jordan Bardella government. So what would you say regarding these statements that look very serious actually if you take them on paper? So for you, this is all fantasy?
Yeah, total fantasy. Easy to say, hard to do. To be honest, it's really, even you and me, we can say we're engaged in limiting public finances, over expansion and deficits, etc. But the only question I would have for you would be how, when, and how much. to me, it's a real problem if I hear someone speaking about finances and this person doesn't give any figure. Of course, we can sell a lot of stories saying that everything is possible. We will reduce the deficit, represents, etc. Actually, we all know the fiscal rules and the European engagements, etc. And this made me think about the national rally and the Jean-Philippe Tanguy assertion about the French contribution to the Euro budget. They say they will limit it from around 20 billions to, anyway, I don't remember the figure, but institutionally speaking, legally speaking, it's not possible. So I'm ready to hear all details. I would love to believe in what they say, but okay, if I have this Mr. Tanguy in front of me, I would just ask him, how will you do in Brussels? How will you explain that? How will you do with the European treaties, etc.?
Is the Meloni, for example, experience. Meloni, who also came from this populist background, and now she seems like a responsible state woman. So this can this happen in France as well?
Okay, first thing I would say, did Meloni reduce the Italian contribution to the European budget? Don't think so. Other thing, Meloni has been elected on a populist program, but to me it went a bit more faster than the national rally in terms of its normalization. I have just few examples. She recognized quite quickly that in terms of labor force, Italy needs immigrants. So they have a program to give a lot of residence cards, etc., to attract foreign workers. Just an example among others. If you take what I said about the Italian contribution to the EU budget, it's more realistic. And if we compare that to national rally, I don't see Rassemblement National, at least until now, they didn't give any proof of flexibility in terms of actually they don't seem to be flexible on their ideology. So to me it's different, but we'll see. Time passing, we'll see. But I think culturally and practically, as we've seen it today, the Italian government, Meloni's government, is rather the exception than the rule in terms of populist governments in Europe that came into power. Easy to compare. Let's just compare it with some Scandinavian countries, some other countries where we've seen the far rights into power. Like Meloni is really an exception. Like the Italian government is really an exception, and she showed to be really, really, really strong in terms of adaptation, both in ideology, but in practically speaking, that's the main difference between the Italian far right and the French one.
Okay, I see what you mean. I think there is another factor that we know is the very specific, political system in France. Sometimes it may happen that the government doesn't have a clear majority in parliament, which has been the case actually for President Macron since 2022. And it can be even more the case going forward. So what would be for you the worst case scenario? Would it be a clear-cut majority for one of the opposition parties? or a kind of a stalemate in which the forces from the left and the right or far right get even bigger, and the center is compressed, but yet no one has a clear-cut majority. What would be the worst case scenario for the markets and for the volatility of French bonds going forward?
It's an interesting question. I've seen, as of today, I've seen some market scenarios and estimates about the potential rise of spreads. They looked at Italy, they looked at France, and they looked at Germany, of course. So regarding the OAT and BTP bond spreads, the worst scenario in all the examined stories was that Emmanuel Macron resignation scenario. So in that case, you can see in this estimate a real rise of the spreads, of the sovereign spreads. A rise that is important. In general, if you have 100 BP rise in spread, this could be considered as an important rise.
So this scenario, by the way, is excluded for the time being by the president himself, as he wrote in a letter to the French people that he will remain until.
Yeah, totally agree with you. I don't know if you, I guess you did. I noticed myself a constructive ambiguity of Emmanuel Macron in the words he used. I mean, he did not exclude it totally, but
okay. That's interesting. That's a good. I didn't actually notice because I didn't read this letter, so that's a good point.
In my opinion, he's not ready to resign in any case.
Okay. But would you say that in any case, if we have a stalemate that comes from this election, the level of volatility would structurally increase on the market, not only for bonds, but also maybe for French and European equities and for the euro? Or would it be actually like the business as usual, or return to the pre-election scenario and environment, with the exception that S&P downgraded the French debt, with the exception that the European Commission launched an excessive deficit procedure against France. So actually there are many risks that are starting to materialize. And so the political risk, will it add on its own another level of volatility that would be really very damaging to the market and to the French assets?
In the short run, first thing to keep in mind is that we have a 2 rounds election. So for sure, we'll have volatility starting from next week after the first round, etc. So yeah, volatility expected in the short run. The next period, we could call it the medium term, and we'll know more about the real economic programs. We will know the real government composition, what are the coalitions, on what people agree and what people do not agree, I mean MPs. So this is the medium run. And I would, to finish, if we talk about the long term, and I end the long term in 27, but there's a presidential election. Simply speaking, I think the French economy's fundamentals are really solid and well anchored. We have a lot of institutional stability. Over the long run, we have a lot of institutions, control, organisms, etc. So you have the political side and the political decisions that can go in a way or in another, but to me, institutional stability and all the rating agencies are saying it. I remember it, reminded it. So in the long run, I'm really not too much worried about France. And if we consider the OAT, the French sovereign bond, as an asset, I would say is a really good asset that offers uh, a very interesting trade-off in terms of risk and yield, and also, as I said in the beginning, liquidity.
I would like to thank you once again for taking part to this podcast. And hopefully we will have, and I'm sure we will have other occasions to discuss this topic in the weeks and months forward.